Thank you, all of you, for being here today. I'm so excited to see this big group. Thanks for joining us at the 2024 ARCUS Annual Meeting. Whether you are tuning in from the Arctic, the lower 48, or somewhere else around the globe, we're so glad to have you guys with us today. And I wanted to just give a little background about ARCUS. The Arctic Research Consortium of the U.S. is our full name. We have been dedicated to supporting Arctic research, education, and Indigenous knowledge systems for over 35 years. Our mission is to facilitate cross-boundary Arctic knowledge, research, communication, and education in the U.S. and with partners across the globe. And we strive to accomplish this mission through fostering strong and productive connections between ARCUS members and among the many players in the broader Arctic research community. Today's annual meeting brings together representatives from our large group of institutional members, along with our staff, our board, individual members, and various community partners. ARCUS represents the interests of a consortium of organizations engaged in Arctic research, including academic institutions, government entities, Indigenous organizations, and corporations. And we welcome almost anyone who's interested in Arctic research and in joining ARCUS. To all of you that are here today representing those aforementioned organizations and those represented by the logos on the screen, thank you all for being a part of ARCUS and for joining us today. Your commitment strengthens our community and the work that we accomplish together, and we look forward to having a great meeting with all of you today. I'll just give a bit of a rundown on what we'll be doing today. We'll start off with after the introductions, we'll start off with a series of panel discussions to set the stage for future discussions. So first of all, at 9:10 a.m., we'll dive into member research and collaboration opportunities where panelists will highlight current projects among ARCUS members and discuss new ways we can be working together. Then at 9:50 a.m., we'll move to the second panel, Bridging Arctic Research and Community Needs. This session will explore more how our collective research efforts can better address and support the priorities and needs of Arctic communities. And lastly, at 10:30, we'll wrap up the panel discussion sessions with a discussion on strengthening the national U.S. Arctic Research Network. And we'll look at ways to create a more unified and resilient national network to support Arctic research going forward into the future. And we've got a little bit of a new format for connection building this year. If you have attended past ARCUS annual meetings, you'll know that fostering connections is something we really care about, and we deeply value providing opportunities to do that. In previous years, we've hosted breakout sessions, but they often require choosing between topics, and sometimes that can be hard to do if there's a couple different things that you're interested in talking about and you end up feeling like you're missing out. So this year we're trying something different. We're inviting everyone to participate in these open panel discussions. So they'll all be in plenary. We'll start with insights from our panelists, but there'll also be opportunities for everyone in the room to contribute. So we strongly encourage everyone to share your insights, either direct questions or in the chat, and add to the conversation throughout the session. So this is your chance to kind of shape the conversations that we take going forward, and we really look forward to hearing from all of you in the audience. After our panel discussions, we'll take a 15-minute break at 11:10. During that break, we'll also be offering an optional speed networking activity. So if you want to go grab coffee or take a bio break, that's great. But if you'd like to take 15 minutes to jump into a quick round of speed networking, we can help connect members together. So these networking breakouts are, as I said, totally optional, but we encourage you to put on your extrovert costume. Think of it as a little early Halloween practice and join in. Speed networking can be a really fun, informal way to connect with people and share topics of interest, reconnect with colleagues, just sort of put your name out there. So we hope many of you will take part, and we'll have instructions for how to jump into those speed networking rooms when we get to that point. And then when we return from that break at 11:25, we'll have an introduction to ARCUS board leadership, followed by at 11:40, a session on ARCUS committees and other ways to get involved. And here we'll be talking about pathways for engagement into our organization, because we would love to have as many people participate in the work that we're trying to do going forward. This organization is about all of you. It's about our community, and we would love to have as many voices as we can participate in that discussion. We'll also provide some important information for new and renewing members at 11:50. And then finally, we'll close out the plenary session at noon with one last speed networking session, giving you one more chance to connect and share before we wrap up for the day. And again, that's optional as well, but we encourage anyone who's interested just to wrap things up with a little closer connection. All right, well, I'm going to make sure that we stay on track before Lisa gives me the little times. So without further ado, I'll introduce the moderators for our first panel on ARCUS member research and collaboration opportunities. Please welcome Stacy Fritz from Alaska Adaptable Housing and Catherine Ginsbach from Georgetown University. Catherine and Stacy, take it away.
Hi, everyone. Very excited that we are hosting the first panel. So the first panel is on ARCUS member research and emerging collaboration opportunities. So we'll go ahead and we'll do a round of introductions. We'll pose a few questions, and then we'll open it up to the broader audience. And then we'll go back and ask a few more questions. If you do have a question that comes up, feel free to raise your hand and we'll call on you when it's open, or put your questions into the chat. But this panel will showcase the work ARCUS members have accomplished over the past year to advance Arctic research. Panelists will highlight key findings and discuss emerging issues and opportunities that the Arctic research community should focus on in the coming year. Participants will be invited to explore how these accomplishments shape future research directions and collaboration. And we have a great panel put together who represent different sectors, organizations, and disciplines. And I'll let them introduce themselves and we'll jump into some questions. So Adrian, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Adrienne Gall. I'm the president of ABR Inc. We're an environmental consulting company that's headquartered in Fairbanks with an office in Anchorage. We do a lot of wildlife research and a lot of landscape ecology, landscape change, and landscape restoration work.
Alexis?
Hi, everyone. Excuse me, I'm Alexis Will. It's the morning here, so my voice is rocky. I'm a marine biologist with World Wildlife Fund's U.S. Arctic program. I'm based in Fairbanks, and my science training is in ecological physiology, how seabirds respond to changes in the environment. But now I'm at a conservation organization, so I work on all sorts of different projects. The flag one I'm on is Arctic Watch, which is a collaborative initiative to support safe Arctic shipping. And then I also contribute to quite a few science education programs.
Ming?
Hi, this is Ming Xiao. I'm a professor of civil engineering at Penn State. My current research area is the permafrost degradation, permafrost coastal erosion, and their impacts on the civil infrastructure and the communities in the Arctic. And specifically, I study the spatial and temporal changes of permafrost properties and how they affect the foundations of civil infrastructure. I'm also the president of the U.S. Permafrost Association. The mission of the USPA is to advance the permafrost science and engineering, and to support the students and early career professionals, and also to facilitate international collaborations. Thank you.
Thanks, Ming. Joshua?
Hi, I'm Josh Stein. I'm a senior scientist at Sandia National Laboratories in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I have been working, actually, I represent Sandia, which has a number of different programs in the Arctic. We do a lot of atmospheric monitoring up on the North Slope. And we also are involved in a research project that's looking at trying to predict how melting permafrost will affect atmospheric carbon emissions in the future. I've also been part of an international group that looking at renewable energy solutions for the Arctic. We held a workshop last spring up in Piteå, Sweden, and we're planning a sort of an international report with a big group of people working on those problems. Thanks.
Great, thanks, everyone. So we'll kick it off just by talking about the current state of Arctic research. We'll do a round robin answer. So can you share some insights into the research activities your community is currently involved in? I know some of you alluded to it in your bio, but feel free to expand. Alexis, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. So we are focused a lot on looking at research into wildlife population health. So tools to monitor wildlife health, and then also including different ways of knowing into that type of monitoring, and also working on innovations that can help. So some of our work over the last couple of years has been looking at developing some tools for polar bear monitoring. And then also I've been working on looking at range-wide health of seabird populations. And I don't want to speak for all conservation organizations, but the question was sort of about conservation. You know, what community do I represent? And what I really see happening is this is repeated across conservation orgs to a greater or lesser degree, is how much time they spend looking at research into habitat health and wildlife health are kind of the two big topics.
Thanks. Adrian, do you want to go?
Sure. ABR, we're engaged in a lot of permit compliance work and permit and sort of long-term monitoring. So for landscape change, we work together with NASA and also using kind of remote sensing to accomplish a lot of those tasks. So as far as, you know, research that we're doing now and general trends, we're seeing a lot more kind of move to desktop type work. So whether it's a wetland delineation that you can do based on satellite imagery, or looking at landscape change using satellite imagery, or tracking caribou with their collars using telemetry. And a lot of that move kind of towards doing things remotely rather than putting boots on the ground, which is something that we had done traditionally. We did put people on the tundra this summer looking for eider nests, looking for shorebird nests, doing detailed measurements for the BLM on assessment, inventory, and monitoring of landscape change in Alaska. So we are still doing boots on the ground work, but in terms of trends, we're seeing a lot of a big move towards trying to do more work remotely and less boots on the ground, people in the air.
Adrian, Josh?
Yeah, Sandia, you know, is a national security laboratory. So we do both like sort of fundamental science research, and I'm part of a center called the Climate Security Center. So we do a lot of research on climate change and remediation using renewable energy or direct carbon capture, things like that. Some of the work we're doing has these multi-use aspects. So one is a project that we're working on is using digital acoustic sensing, or distributed acoustic sensing, sorry, that goes on basically dark fiber optic lines. And there's a fiber optic line that goes off the north slope of Alaska, where we've been doing research to listen to how ice comes in the winter and where it hits ground. We can hear whales, and you could obviously use this technology potentially for, you know, hearing ships and things like that. And so that's an interesting project. We're also working, like I said, a lot on renewable energy projects. We have a number of projects throughout Alaska where we're looking at integrating solar, marine, like power systems, hydrogen, a variety of different, you know, low carbon fuel experiments and grid integration projects. Yeah, I then we have a long history of doing atmospheric monitoring. As I mentioned, we have a balloon program that we recently converted from helium to hydrogen. So we do, I think, daily balloon launches off the north coast of Alaska to do studies of atmospheric changes and things that are going on in the stratosphere.
Thanks, Josh. Ming?
Yes, the community that I'm involved in is the researchers in the permafrost science and engineering. So I'm probably speaking, in general about the permafrost community. I really have seen a more increased data collection and for the permafrost, for natural environment and the built environment, using multiple approaches. One is using a large capacity drone. And this summer, when I was in Reykjavik at the airport, I saw multiple research teams carrying out big boxes with the drones, and some the challenges of shipping the batteries there. But I see compared with last year, there are more people using remote sensing and to supplement the traditional ground-based data collection. Also, I've seen more applying their research outcomes to meet the community needs, and there are more community collaboration. We're not doing enough, but I really see the direction moving in that. And third is a more emphasis on the education, and particularly focus on from maybe middle school, high school, or even college students, and in the indigenous community, and also in the temperate regions. I see there are more community, education going. That's really great. That's really for our future. Yeah.
Thanks, Ming. Sounds like everybody has really exciting projects, and I feel like we could probably spend, an hour on each of them to really get the full effect. But looking ahead, where do you see the direction of Arctic research heading over the next few years? Are there specific technologies, methods, or collaborations that you think will play a crucial role in shaping the future of Arctic research? A lot of you kind of mentioned this remote data censoring, diving into deeper work with communities. But just kind of wanting to get your thoughts on that. Ming, why don't we start with you?
Yes. Thanks, Catherine. I see in the near future that there are probably in the community that I'm involved in, there are two directions probably and will getting stronger. One is the data collection, and in a large scale, and through a combination of approaches, and also the data sharing cross disciplines. Engineers, collect data that share with scientists, and data and share with social scientists and ecosystems. And this kind of a cross-disciplinary collaboration through the data sharing, I think is going to be more in the future. And then two is the data analysis using machine learning or artificial intelligence, for example. And using the data, we have lots of data, right? And how do we, analyze the data and find patterns, and then do the prediction of what's going to happen in the future? That's machine learning. I see those approaches are going to be used more and more in the next few years.
Thanks, Ming. Josh?
Yeah, I agree entirely with Ming. I think some of the challenges, though, with this more data-centric approaches are, how do you actually incorporate all these different data sets? And it requires standardization. There's this concept of fair data, findable, accessible, interoperable, and what's the third one? I forget, but anyway, there's this idea of like it's not enough just throw data over a fence and allow people to use it. You need to really spend some time in trying to understand, like make that data really accessible and well documented. And I think that's going to be that is one of the challenges with, I think there's a great opportunity, but we have to also learn how to share data for it to be of maximum value. And I think one of the neat things about working in the Arctic is that there is really a multidisciplinary, like every project that I've been involved in has a lot of multidisciplinary aspects, and different disciplines have different kind of standards and ways to treat data. And so I think more cross-disciplinary approaches that can kind of allow the data to kind of be used in multiple ways would be really valuable.
Thanks, Josh. Adrienne?
We work a lot with federal agencies. We are not a federal agency, but we work with them a lot. And so one of the concerning trends that I have seen, unfortunately, is the attrition in funding for those federal agencies, particularly the ones that are tasked with monitoring natural resources. And so I have watched the Migratory Bird Management Branch at the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service in Anchorage go through horrible attrition, where they've gone from, you know, a group of 15 people working on seabird stuff down to 2. And so my concern is that, yes, remote sensing is fantastic. Yes, having data available is great. But if the data collection all stopped in the year 2020 and never restarted, then we're all kind of at risk if we think that we can do it all with data that have already been collected. And that's a little bit what I'm seeing over on the regulatory side of things and the monitoring side of things on the, you know, out of academia, but over in government in particular. I mean, we've got more seabirds in Alaska than anywhere else, and yet some of the most poorly funded federal agencies that are tasked with monitoring those resources. And the same goes for the terrestrial resources too. And so that to me is something that is deeply concerning, the defunding of the DOI and what that is doing to our ability to monitor natural resources, particularly in Alaska.
Thanks, Adrienne. Alexis?
So one of the things that I think is an exciting trend that I'm seeing people work on is really working on building capacity in Arctic communities to do some of the boots on the ground data collection, and seeing whether there's an exportable model that can be built. And I think I saw Corey was on here, and I feel like his project with Rising Voices Changing Coasts is really leading the way on this, and looking to see how to bring people that are living already out on the land doing the things and could collect data for projects for people elsewhere, how to make that a functional and really beneficial model for both communities and for scientists. And I'm really excited to see how that develops and takes off.
So Alexis, thanks everyone for those answers. We'll open it up now to see if there's any questions in the audience. I know one came in to the chat, so we can start with that one. So Tracy asked, wondering how remote communities and Indigenous peoples are receiving the remote collection. How are they included in the outcomes or final reports? I know some of you talked about integrating local communities and then figuring out this data sharing piece. It would be great to expand on those. And feel free to jump in. I'll call it individually.
Is the one example I can put forth from the NASA work that J.G. Frost has been doing is that it's been collaborative from the start. And so the project was conceived working with communities in Western Alaska to develop the questions. And that included a combination of remote sensing and in situ sampling. And so I think when folks are involved in developing the research questions to begin with, and at that point, if they're not already familiar with remote sensing, get introduced to how that can be combined with, you know, to answer their question, then when it comes to results, folks are already expecting it and understand where it's going to come from. Also, I think a lot of people in remote communities are used to remote sensing in terms of looking at the weather and looking at ice and looking at a lot of remote data streams anyway. So I don't think these are new concepts at all. And I think having them integrated from the beginning and having folks in remote communities involved in the questions from the beginning, then remote data are not going to be any different than in situ collected data.
Thanks, Adrian. Anyone else jump in?
At Sandia, we've always had targeted efforts at internship programs, and we try to use those internship programs to develop relationships with communities. And so we've specifically had programs to bring interns to Sandia, and then also hopefully work with them and their communities in the future. So we've had targeted programs, and especially with Indigenous programs, in my experience, it works best when you have people who are running those programs who are part of Indigenous communities themselves, and have a better connections and maybe share some shared experiences. And so that's, at least we've been working successfully in the Indian Energy Program at DOE, and the person who runs that is from the Navajo Nation, and she's been very successful in that regard. So
Thanks, Josh. Yeah, that seems like a great way to kind of get communities involved early on through internships and student recruitment. There's another question that came into the chat. Could this panel speculate on how we can advance or restart efforts to develop system-level pan-Arctic understanding of permafrost, wildlife, weather, whatever, with severe limitations on access to observations for more than half of the Arctic?
Okay,
I can just sort of, mainly kind of an idea sparked by Adrian's comment about, the difficulty of getting boots on the ground for doing things like, migratory bird observations, or that's not my area, but I do have hope that some of the drones and artificial intelligence technology could end up really helping in those types of activities. I mean, just in my experience recently, you come into the United States now, if you're on global entry, you don't even have to show your passport anymore, and you walk in, they know, a lot of times you don't even need a boarding pass. They'll just take a picture of you. I think there's a lot of technology that will allow huge amounts of data collection in the future. You can already take your Google and take a picture of something and it tells you what it is. I'm sure that works I imagine it works for birds. So I just wonder if that might be a way that we could, a positive thing about AI. There's a lot of negative things about AI, but I think there could be a lot of positive things as well.
I was going to add the data collection and data sharing. We're not doing enough. There are still lots of data missing, and there's gaps. So, and in addition to that, and after we collect the data, and sharing it is also very, very difficult. In one discipline to the other, it's hard to understand the data. Although this discipline may need, but hard to understand the data collected from other discipline. So how do we really have this kind of broad sharing and understanding of data is a challenge. So I think the data narration is or curation is important, and so that so that the communities that need the data. And then if we make data really complicated in a very complicated in Excel files or some other data format, and even for researchers to understand, then we couldn't expect for the general public to understand. So that's something that we still need to work on.
Thanks, Ming. Adrian?
Alexis, go ahead.
Thanks. I just will real quickly speak to what I think might be an underlying question about this is how do we work with Russia? And as So WWF used to have a really great pan-Arctic collaboration in the Global Arctic Program, and then Russia kicked WWF Russia out of Russia, and so we no longer have that connection. And from what I've seen is it's not super hopeful yet. So I know that there are efforts to try to continue to work with Russian scientists, but those scientists often face a lot of hazards and danger at home if they're found to be collaborating with others. And so even in some instances, when people have been successful at meeting in a neutral country, like I know there's, I can't remember what it was about, was maybe something about wildlife. They're able to successfully meet in Turkey, I think, and have Russian researchers there. But I know that it's just become more and more fraught for them to participate even in those neutral meetings. So I haven't heard of a workaround that people have found or a magic solution to this. It's something that I do know people are still thinking about. It's not something that has just been given up on, even though I know the Arctic Council has started again and their working groups are trying to get going. But it's something that is on a lot of people's mind, and just no one has really found a really blanket way to do it safely for everyone.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna get at, Alexis, and also just say that severe limitations on access is a good phrase, because despite limitations, there are still collaborators, there are still people doing work, there is still information exchange. It is much more challenging, but it is happening. And if you think in terms of, timescales of change, I am hopeful that because there are good people continuing the work, even though it's a little bit in the dark, that the curtain will lift again. And when it does, there are people and there will be information to access to fill in those gaps.
Thanks, Adrian. I think that was really well said, and especially thinking about how we can use science as these channels for Arctic diplomacy. I'll go ahead and we'll kind of take a pause now, and I'll pass it to Stacy to get some more questions for the panelists.
Yeah, and to the point of the last question, there was an entire session on this subject at the Alaska Anthropological Association, how the lack of access to Russia since the war in Ukraine has impacted social science in the Arctic, which a lot of people might be outside their purview, but it's had a huge effect on people whose entire careers have been based a lot of times in Chukotka or the Far East. One interesting thing we're seeing is that a bunch of people who have built careers around doing fieldwork in Russia can no longer do that fieldwork, and they are shifting their research to Alaska and Canada. So we're seeing a lot of pastoralism, reindeer researchers, anthropologists of northern infrastructure who have been focused on Russia can no longer conduct fieldwork, and so they're sort of shifting to North America. That's, it's not a benefit, it's just how people are adapting. And the only way, besides Telegram or social media, it's actually one thing that anthropologists are doing is monitoring social media to try to keep track of trends on the ground in Russia with people that they used to be able to live with. So thank you guys so much for answering these questions. There's a couple more questions, and I think you've covered some of these, but if you could just again focus on maybe again, besides not having access to half of the Arctic, major challenges that your community is currently facing in its research efforts, and how are issues like funding or infrastructure or environmental change or geopolitics. I think we did kind of cover that, but and I think you did cover this, but Alexis, I'll pass it to you to just highlight major challenges.
Yeah, I have a couple. One that has come up recently that I was surprised at and has been mentioned before is artificial intelligence. and how that I think this is a challenge for the entire community in terms of how it's being used. And this, I don't come at this from necessarily a data analysis standpoint, but I've been seeing it more and more in writing, used as in writing. So I've seen people use AI to actually submit an entire grant proposal. People have recommended me to use AI to kick off an idea for how to write a paper. And so I think this is going to be something that, while not a huge challenge, is going to be a sort of surprising thing that we'll find ourselves having to navigate in terms of what's the appropriate use and what's a common standard we can all agree on about how much is it okay to use AI as a language tool, not just as a data analysis tool. That was totally unexpected. That has just come up in the last couple weeks, this thing that I've noticed. And then the other things are not necessarily new or different. For conservation organizations, we always grapple with trying to maintain a consistent focus because it's kind of in our nature of trying to keep members engaged with our cause that we pivot to new flashy and shiny things. And so really trying to maintain consistency in our research and our projects so that we can actually make progress. And then the other thing that we face that I'm not sure is common across all of the organizations here, but our image is something we really have to work on a lot. And so we work from the local, regional, national to international level. And so we're having to sort of navigate messaging across those different levels. So things internationally can affect how we're seen locally. And so really trying to bridge that gap, which has been something that I don't think is always a common thing for researchers to think about. But as we're talking just recently about, the geopolitical situation, sometimes the really big things do affect us on the ground, and having that awareness has been eye-opening to me. Might have been helpful if I hadn't been aware of it when I was just a postdoc, but.
Yeah, that's super important points. I'll pass it to Adrian. And again, it's major challenges, and I think you've touched on this, but elaborate.
Yeah, the defunding at the Department of Interior for us is a big one, because a lot of the research that ABR has produced over the decades has been in collaboration with partners on the federal and state side. It's been in response to questions on how to manage natural resources. It's been in response to or dictated by permit requirements and an enforcement of those permit requirements, and a perception by the public, by the private sector, that if they do not comply with those requirements, that there will be some kind of a negative backlash. And a lot of that public perception pressure seems to have lessened or possibly reversed course. And so the incentives for a lot of our partners that we work with on the private sector side to fund research type activities or the publication of information that we gather on their dime. Some of our clients understand the value in that and appreciate the value in that. I feel like maybe fewer and fewer do, because there hasn't been that positive reinforcement and the ability of the regulators to provide the carrots and sticks to keep that happening.
Distrust in organizations. Josh, got anything to contribute here? Major challenges?
Yeah, I actually agree that I think funding is going to be increasingly a challenge, and I think we need to find ways to bundle, I kind of a concept of bundling value. So I mentioned cross-disciplinary research centers and things like that. I think, if you're going for all these different agencies, it's like a death by 1,000 cuts, right? Each agency is like cutting its budget. So we need to figure out ways of building bridges between these agencies so that we can, I mean, I kind of imagine like there's a lot of need for field work, and we need to identify all the field work that could be done at a particular site and somehow figure out a way of getting multiple agencies to fund some sort of center. I mean, I think that's the only way we're going to do it. If we do it in little tiny, individually, we're never going to, it's just always going to be very small funding levels. And that's at least what I've been seeing, is that the funding levels for projects just keep getting smaller and smaller, and the expectations just are either staying the same or getting larger. And it's really affecting, what we can do. So.
Interesting. Yep. Ning?
Yes, Daisy, very quickly, the top two challenges for us as researchers, such as in academia, are the direct application of our research outcomes to meet the community needs, and also the application of research outcomes to inform or even influence the policy. We as researchers, we're good at probably publication or writing grants, but first and foremost is the make sure our research outcomes are useful. That's how we should educate our students, make sure what we learn or really be used and for the community, and then even to influence the policy to the right direction. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I'll just add that it's very interesting for me to hear these challenges about funding when I'm in the infrastructure world. After the Infrastructure Act and the Inflation Reduction Act, there's actually plenty of funding for the type of work that I'm involved in. But one interesting challenge is associated with that as part of the Infrastructure Act, the Build America, Buy America Act, which restricts people to buying only American produced materials for housing in Alaska, is a huge problem. So, and we can move on. I don't think we have too long left, so we'll try to quickly move through just a couple more questions. And please, we got one more from the chat, so I will share that real quick. Do you think something like another mosaic expedition would be beneficial to get agencies, countries, scientists back together to study the environment? A huge project like this would spread out the funding between many agencies. Does anybody have any thoughts on another mosaic expedition and whether that could be feasible?
I definitely think that
Yeah.
model could be expanded. Yeah.
Okay, one more question, guys. Engagement and outreach. How are you working with engaging with others outside of your immediate research community, Indigenous communities, policymakers, or the general public? Do you have any examples of things that have worked really well, or strategies that have helped amplify your research? Alexis, you sort of talked about this, but if anybody wants to chime in on success stories.
I guess one thing that's just sort of in the last few years has been really successful for us is open source software. And it's something that I think everybody kind of knows about, but they don't really, until you actually get involved in hosting an open source or maintaining an open source software, it's quite amazing how much you can do. So, I mean, we have some examples of projects that we started that now have over 120 contributors to the software. So that's a model I think that really could play, it really helps with outreach. It's limited because you're looking at that case, you're looking at programmers, but there are a lot of programmers out there. So.
Well, I think that model works if you also are building a program that communities can contribute to. So community science, community-based science, and places where people can contribute their observations. Everybody likes credit for turning something in. Maybe not everybody. My kid, I sometimes wonder, but most people, when they turn things in, they get the positive reinforcement. And I think a lot of those, programs like COAST and programs where people can, get their gold star when they turn in information, I think is a really good way to get and keep people engaged.
Great. I don't know how much time we have left. We have, if anybody has.
We are out of time for panel one, Stacey.
Well, we will get to these topics throughout the meeting. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Well, thank you to our first panelists. I didn't have to use all of my clock emojis or my, ring a bell or anything. It was a great conversation. And our next panel discussion is on bridging Arctic research and community needs. We do have one more panelist that's joined us as well today, Heather Soyuk, Jean Gordon. And I will let Audrey introduce our panelists, and then I will share our first round of questions following that.
Thank you, Lisa. And thanks everyone for being here for our second panel of the day. I would like to introduce our esteemed panelists. We have Julie Raymond Yakubian from COERIC, Inc. We have Howie Epstein from the University of Virginia, Corey Sekuek Erickson, I hope I get all that right, Corey, from Ikagun Engagement, Heather Soyuk, Jean Gordon from Soyuk Solutions, and Marie Lowe from the University of Alaska Anchorage. So welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Excited to have a chance to chat with you all. And I'd like to invite you to just give a short introduction about yourself and your work before we jump into questions. Maybe we'll start with Julie.
Sure. Good morning, everyone. I'm Julie Raymond Yacobian. I'm joining you today from Girdwood, and I work for COERIC Incorporated, which is the Alaska Native nonprofit tribal consortium for the 20 federally recognized tribes in the Bering Strait region of Alaska. I am COERIC Social Science Program Director and have been with COERIC for 17 years now, and happy to be here today.
Great. Thank you, Julie. Why don't we bump it over to Howie?
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Howie Epstein. I'm a professor of environmental sciences at the University of Virginia. I've been doing Arctic research since 1996, working in Alaska, Canada, and Siberia. Mostly, I'm a tundra vegetation ecologist, looking at the spatial and patterns and temporal dynamics of tundra vegetation. But more recently, I've gotten involved in community collaborative research, specifically in the community of Utqiagvik, Alaska, looking at interactions between the built and natural environments. And thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, Howie. Let's bump to Corey.
Hi, everybody. My name is Corey Sekuek Erickson, and I come from the Bering Straits region. I was raised in Inuit with a few years in Savunga and several years in St. Michael's. My dad was teaching at the time. My mom was from Utqiagvik and my grandma was from Shishmaref, so I got family scattered around from Inuit to Shishmaref. I have a background in anthropology, actually, and I worked for UIC Science for many years, which kind of brought me into this world of engaging communities with scientists. And then about almost 4 years ago, I started my own consulting to help in that area. It's called Ikagun. Ikagun means bridge or something that takes you across an impassable divide. And I try to take that approach to be a cultural bridge in the spaces that I work in. My parents are Jeff and Donna Erickson, and they still live in Inuit, and I have 4 brothers, and my wife's from Shishmaref, and we have 3 kids, 2 in high school.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Corey. Heather?
Hi, everybody. My name's Heather Soyuk, Jean Gordon. I'm a Nukak, and my family is originally from Nome, so I'm enrolled in the Nome Eskimo community. I grew up in Homer, Alaska, where my grandmother ended up homesteading and lived on her reindeer ranch there. I'm currently calling in from, there's a National Congress of American Indians conference right now happening in Las Vegas, so I am here for that, learning about some of the work happening around tribal temporary assistance for Native families. I have a consulting organization, Soyuk Solutions, and I'm supporting Indigenous communities and tribes in research and evaluation and technical assistance set by and requested by communities, as well as some researchers seeking to work with Indigenous communities. I'm also an Arctic Fulbright Scholar, and I am involved in Arctic research planning and all the things. So yes, happy to be here.
Thank you, Heather and Marie.
Hi everyone, I'm Marie Lowe. I'm at the University of Alaska Anchorage, where I've been for about the last 20 years. I have a background in applied anthropology. I'm currently the chair of the Department of Public Policy and Administration there, and also my other hat is a researcher at the Institute of Social and Economic Research, and I'm primarily involved in research on rural development in the North and a lot of infrastructure projects lately. So, and thanks for inviting me.
Thank you all for being here today. We really appreciate the opportunity to chat with you all. So we'll jump into some questions that we have for all of you, and I'll paste those in the chat so that folks can also think about anything they have to follow up. I think Lisa's going to start off with that set of questions for our panelists.
Yeah, so I'm going to start everyone off with our first 3 questions, which are all sort of interrelated, so you can answer them all together, and we'll have them in the chat as well. So how would you define relevant and respectful research in the Arctic? Why is this a critical and timely issue to consider in doing Arctic research today? And could you provide an example of a project or initiative that meets community criteria for being relevant and respectful? And if I could maybe start with Heather.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much. So yeah, if I think of relevant, respectful research in the Arctic, I mean, there's just so many things to consider, but the first thing that pops in my head is relationships before research. That is my approach. That's what I believe. And that's what I really think helps promote a lasting opportunity to have relationships and sustainable work together, in order to have ongoing consent and desired participation. So I think of that really allows also the researcher or whoever to really support and learn what community needs and research interests and desires are. And then also be able to, really understand that, to be able to follow through for real life outcomes. This type of research, I think, builds on self-determination and does help to also bridge a gap between knowledge hierarchy when we have researchers really seeking to bring in or engage directly with Indigenous knowledge as expertise, engage directly with Indigenous knowledge holders as experts. That also helps reduce knowledge hierarchy issues in policymaking and larger spaces. So there's a role to play there that helps promote this research in a good way. And I think that part of this is really taking the time to learn about the history of the communities, to learn about the culture of the communities, because, in the Arctic, colonization largely has not ended. So people are still living through colonization, still engaging in and working through historical trauma, and, being aware of this and also making sure not to re-trigger things, as well as coming in with an approach that recognizes these as well instead of ignores it completely. So this may call for an interdisciplinary team. This may call for a slightly different type of engagement than may be used in another space. And I want to say that when I think of, why is the Arctic such a critical, timely place? I really think the Arctic is a hotspot for research due to, this intensification of climate change that everybody is seeing. It's also a unique space with many people still living rural and remote, with not like super easy access to and from urban centers. And so we have people who have adapted and mitigated climate issues in the social community, all kinds of things from a very community-based and community-centered perspective for thousands of years. And for me, more recently, when I think of an example of a project or initiative where I've been able to engage in this type of research, I've been quite excited to respond to community RFPs. this is a fantastic opportunity. Like this idea of community-based research, community-led research, none of those ever really comes from a community RFP. It still comes from the researcher bringing that to the community. And so I've been working a bit with Chugachmute, who puts out their own RFPs. And that has been a really unique way to really feel like I can be responsive to a set scope of work, and bring, you know, whatever tools I've learned and contribute the way that is desired and requested of me.
That's great. Thank you, Heather. Julie, would you be willing to share next?
Sure, thanks, Lisa. Thanks, Heather. COERC has spent an extraordinary amount of time thinking about this issue of relevant and respectful research, and I'm going to put in the chat here a link to COERC region research protocols, which hopefully many of you have seen, but if you haven't, please do take a look at them if you plan on doing any work in the COERC region. Tribes in our region, as Heather was kind of referring to, alluding to, have had a long history with researchers and research activities, as well as other communities across the Arctic, of course. And based on that experience, both positive and not positive, these protocols were developed, and they give really good guidance for how to do relevant and respectful research, how to do meaningful research. And that meaningful is a really important word for me. We really at COERC don't believe that it's a choice about whether or not to do meaningful research, meaningful to Arctic communities research anymore, that it's an imperative and that we all need to be doing it as the research community. And in order to do meaningful research, you have to have those relationships and that engagement with tribal communities that are in the Arctic and for which the Arctic is their homelands. And so that meaningful part is really important to me. And it really does boil down to relationships and making sure that there are relationships with the community that you want to work with, that you're being responsive to them, and that you're following protocols and guidelines that are important to them as well. And I'll just mention one thing out of the many things that are in this protocol document from COERC, because it comes up a lot, and that is about making kind of prejudgments or assumptions about what may or may not be important or of interest to communities. We see this a lot, especially in the harder sciences, researchers deciding, oh, this thing that I'm doing about the atmosphere or something that's not going to be of interest to communities, so I don't need to engage with them and I don't need to develop those relationships. And that's probably not the case. I have very, very, very rarely encountered a topic about which tribes said, no, we have no interest in that. It's not related to us at all. So I think an important point is to not make those prejudgments and assumptions about what is and isn't of interest to tribes and that they may or may not want to collaborate with you on. In terms of work that I think meets these criteria, I'm going to talk about something we're involved in because I know it best and know it well. We're working with a number of collaborators on a project about ethics in 3D research and digitization of cultural heritage items, items from the Bering Strait region that are currently living in museums and collections in other parts of the world. And this work is happening in collaboration with Dr. Maida Sobahas, who's at the University of Missouri, as well as partners in Florida at the Smithsonian, from a number of tribal communities and other partners as well. And we're looking, it's actually a series of projects where we're looking at ethics in 3D research, what is being practiced now and how that might be improved to the benefit of tribes and Indigenous peoples in the future. And then actually carrying out 3D digitization work in a number of museums around the country, doing things like virtual and in-person workshops, bringing knowledge holders into collections so that they can work directly with items. We're doing both digital repatriation and working on physical repatriation of items, making videos that show how that process works and providing instruction to tribal members who are interested in actually physically doing that work. So that has been a really rewarding and fulfilling project for all of us. So far, it's ongoing. but I think is one good example. And I also just wanted to say, I have a spooky background, and I'm also wearing ghosts in like ARCUS tradition here. So I think I'm the only one that did it.
Until you leaned forward.
I know they're not visible, but like, boo.
Thank you for being spooky. I encourage anyone else. My background is always kind of spooky. I guess I could have done better today. Now I feel underdressed, but maybe during the break I'll find some costume accessory. Thank you, Julie. Howie, could you share next, please?
Yeah, thank you. I kind of have a feeling that I'm going to reiterate quite a bit of what has already been said. I have some similar feelings and comments. When I think about relevance in terms of research, I think about relevance for whom and for what purpose. And as a scientist, I have some sense that scientific relevance is not controlled or maintained by the peer review process, either from proposals or from research articles. And relevance for the general public seems to be a challenging thing to me, given that we have such disparate views among groups within our general public. But community-based or community collaborative research it's really the best place to be relevant, and because there's commonality of issues, commonality of goals, commonality of purpose. And I think in terms of respectful research, I think Heather brought it up, and also Adrian brought it up with regard to a project being done by J.J. Frost, and respectful research is equal participation from the very beginning. So it's equal participation from the idea generation part of the work, through proposal development, through results dissemination, and the development of actionable items from research. That's a real pie in the sky kind of goal. I think it's pretty challenging to get there, but it's not impossible, and we've already seen examples. We are seeing examples of that being done. One other aspect of respectful research is respect that I've come across is respect for time, and you really have to respect each other. You have to respect each other's time and time commitment, and the way that academic or agency or institutional researchers and community collaborators approach this is different. So if I'm working in a community, that's my job. You know, I'm there to do what I'm supposed to do. But with community collaborators, I'm taking them away from typically taking them away from their jobs. If they're dedicating time to this research, it's something that is different from what their normal days are like. It's not necessarily part or all of what they do. So you have to be respectful of time and the time commitment that's involved. Well, we know the Arctic is changing faster than anywhere else on the planet. We know the livelihoods, biological and cultural, of people who live in the Arctic, although those are likely inseparable, are in jeopardy. And even though that there's much of the Arctic that's not inhabited, the priorities of the people living in the Arctic, they contribute to the broader perspective of the Arctic as a whole. Getting back to respect, and this has also been brought up already. There's really no substitute for being there. Okay, there's no substitute at all for actually spending time in the community. And being from the University of Virginia, we're a long ways away from Witgalvik, which is where we're doing our work. But we have to make the effort to do that. And during our visits, where everyone is excited to be together, and that's a fantastic sign, and it's indicative of the time spent there. And what we also try to do is not just have folks from University of Virginia go to Yagvik, but we've also brought project collaborators to the University of Virginia as well. So we try to do these joint visits and joint time together in different places. So the project that I'm working on at Yagvik is an NSF project. It's highly multidisciplinary, also interdisciplinary, and we I think we're striving to do respectful and relevant research, and I think we're doing that. I think we're learning as we go. I think that we were not everyone was not completely involved at the proposal development stage, but during this project, we've actually worked with the community to develop new ideas, and actually proposed new projects, and recently received funding for a new project where the idea was generated and developed as a result of our working on an existing project. So I think that our project is a reasonable example of relevant and respectful research, and I really just hope we're learning as we go, and projects will just get better and better at this as we move forward. So yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Howie. And if you have a link that you want to share with your work, that would be great.
We'll
too,
do.
so people can learn more about it. Corey, would you be willing to answer next?
Sure. All right. Gonna reiterate on some points that have already been made, obviously. Digging into the relevancy part first. Obviously, all research is relevant to someone. I mean, all research is going to be relevant to the researcher, obviously, but if you look at the different cohorts, the advisors, the field, the specialty that they're in, obviously going to be relevant there. There's the general public, funders, policymakers, and then finally local indigenous communities. The question is, how do you try to balance that and make it relevant to the most important cohorts according to the funding or the drive of the funding agency. I think that we have priorities have shifted obviously in the last 10 years to really make it more or less a targeted relevancy to indigenous communities, on the lines that our communities are facing these really extreme threats, facing extreme threats to our culture and livelihood due to environmental changes, and at the time we have scientists in our backyards pretty much, so why not make it try to make that research as relevant as possible to the needs that we need in our communities. Now moving on to the respectful aspect of it, I honestly, I mean, respect is self-explanatory. I mean, come on, respect is respect. Respect in our cultures is very similar to other respect around the world, except we do have, it is different in ways too. We have different cultural norms that you have to kind of follow, and the only way you're going to learn that is by either experiencing it and or doing your due diligence on digging into the resources that are available out there, the core protocols, the ICC EEE documents. Those are written by our elders and our peoples directly. Those are decades of representation of voices. So if you're coming into the Arctic in any of those regions, you have to read that type of stuff, because you're going to get a better idea of some of our cultural norms to be respectful. And honestly, don't be scared to jump in, because like even in the question in the chat, I don't mean to just help as we're going to kind of help, because there's very little pre-proposal support to develop questions with communities. How do you do that? It's really tricky, and I think I'll circle back to that in our second round of discussion. But thank you for asking that, because it kind of it's built into the answer that will come in a bit. So going back to the respectful portion of this is that you have to approach the situation with the willingness to be vulnerable and not to take things personally, because honestly, we all know that there's a revolving door of people coming in and out of our communities. Unfortunately, scientists represent that revolving door, and as part of the context, most of the engagement experiences that we have as local rural people in our communities is almost everybody who comes in is looking for something to extract, whether it be an experience, an animal, big game, whether it be our fish for fishing. And unfortunately, we're part of that kind of extractive revolving door. So you really have to recognize the context when you're stepping into these communities and do it as respectful as possible. What I'll say about that is that we don't necessarily have the power to uproot and change this entire system. We have to kind of follow this system that we're working in. I mean, at some point, it would be nice to have systemic change, but and I'll talk about that in our second round of questions. But we're working with in-system solutions here, and we're trying to overcome barriers that a lot of us are commonly face in working with our communities. And part of that is just the extreme temporality of our time in the communities. So just try to be mindful of that context and don't try not to take things personally, because you represent hundreds of years of people coming and going, unfortunately, and it's really hard to not take things personally. I struggle with that, personally too. I come into new communities and face that as well, even being a mixed blood, kind of local sort of person. So I'll give one quick example. I was just at a conference last week. A young fellow came up, and I believe he was part of the DoD. It was a geospatial conference, and he said, "Hey, Corey, man, like I'm forced to go into these communities in and out. We're assigned this little area to go in and do the survey or something, and like I really wish I could have more time to engage with folks, and I feel horrible about this. Like, what do I do?" And I said, "Hey, what are you doing?" He's like, "Oh, I'm scared, to take this first step or to communicate because I don't want to open that door sort of thing." But I'm telling him is like, I told him, put a care package together. I mean, coffee, tea, some, goodies, write a letter to each of the entities of that village that you're going to, because he was talking about going in around one village. I believe he didn't tell me which one. Explain to them that you understand this kind of context of the revolving door to some extent, and that you are going to try to do things as respectful as you possibly can, and to kind of just provide the introduction kind of like that, where you just be honest, show some vulnerability, be willing to reach out early, don't let it fester, because a lot of times you'll just be scared to make that connection. But I guess that's kind of went all over the map, but hopefully I didn't go too far over. I'll build on some of those answers as we do our second round. Thanks.
Thank you, Corey. And then finally we have Marie.
Thanks. Yeah, I like to pick up on something that Ming Xiao talked about. Hi, Ming. Good to see you. He talked about how it was really important. He felt it was really important to do research that is useful, and he talked about it in the context of his students, showing his students that their research could be useful. But for me, doing relevant and respectful research in Arctic communities means doing research that's useful to them. And I think that, as Corey alluded to, we have to work in this very structured system, where science is funded in a particular way, and you have to follow particular processes, and it doesn't always jive with what's happening at the local level, and particularly in the way that a lot of our research results aren't immediately useful for communities. I think that that's something that we need to talk about further and try to figure out how to overcome that. That we can't really propose so much research anymore with communities that there's going to be some outcome that might impact them in 10 years. And so, yeah, so thinking through how to make the research results more immediately useful to communities, I think is very important. And this, you know, why I think this is a critical and timely issue is I think that we should have more conversations about why basic and, you know, I'll use the dirty word applied research aren't mutually exclusive, and that we should be doing more applied research, or if you want to put it in NSF's terms, use inspired research, if that's a good euphemism for it. But I'll just emphasize that I think that we need to have a discussion, particularly when we're working with Arctic communities, about how we can do more applied research. I think one great example of a project or an initiative that I'm involved with, you know, great research collaborator in Alaska. If you're not familiar with the Yukon River Intertribal Watershed Council, I mean, their model is just excellent. I mean, it's not without problems, right? It's because they're covering many different tribes along the Yukon, but with the overall goal of their science program is to make the Yukon River drinkable for generations, the water drinkable for generations to come. And they have an amazing citizen science program, and they're involving you know, K-12 kids in their research, and also the, you know, the science director, for example, Etta Mutter, she's not Alaska Native, but she, you know, her science team, they're working for the tribes doing this research. And so it is immediately useful research that I feel is also conducted in a very respectful manner. So and sustained over time, as Heather was talking about, that the relationships are so important, and they take a lot of time. And yeah, I think I'll just leave it at that. So thanks.
Thanks so much, Marie. And so because we have quite a few panelists on this discussion topic, we're going to hold the open questions until the end because we only have about 7 minutes left. So I'm going to turn it over to Audrey for our second batch of questions, which is going to have to be a little bit short on answers. So we have a time for a couple of questions at the end.
Thank you, Lisa, and thank you, panelists, for all of the information you've shared so far. And we had a set of 2 questions to sort of kick off the second round of information and engagement. And I'm going to just kind of morph those into just a single question, because you guys have all mentioned some of the challenges existing in the process of greater use of respectful research, engagement, and techniques in Arctic research. And so I guess I'd like to just kind of thinking about those questions and everything you have said so far, if all of you could weigh in on ways that you think the ARCUS network and potentially the Arctic research community in general could work together towards solutions for those challenges. What are our next steps, and how do we work collaboratively to solve some of the challenges inherent in working with communities and addressing community needs? And let's start this time with Corey.
Cool, thank you. So these obstacles are not going to be going away anytime soon, unfortunately. And you know, Patricia Cochran, a leader from our region, said 40 years ago, creating the Alaska Native Science Commission. Same exact discussions. We have a lot of new people in Arctic research. Obviously, this is a built-in kind of, you know, bringing students on, and so we're going to be forced to continue to work through these types of things. I think finding in-system solutions can prove to be very extremely inefficient workarounds. Can't send money to a tribe, find another way. You know, want to work with tribes co-producing research with no proposal support. Good luck. Can't do this or that. You know, so the truth is, I think we eventually need to think about adjusting the system, and maybe that requires a review commission or something. So I just wanted to leave you with that. Unfortunately, there's no one size fits all. You know, when things really happen, right, it's almost like the stars need to align, so in a way, kind of thing. It's hard to replicate what things one project to another project, but I think the ARCUS community and these kind of spaces can share solutions, can share how we've overcome barriers, and kind of be a support system on that end, and hopefully stimulate more discussions between community members and science projects to help with that kind of pre-proposal type of thing as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Corey. That's great. Marie, do you want to weigh in here?
Sure, I'll do so quickly since we're short on time, but I think one of the biggest challenges for me over the course of my career, and especially now, is you know, what I'm hearing from partner communities all the time is, well, you know, we really don't need that much more research, you know. We need money to either build or protect our infrastructure, or protect our subsistence way of life and so forth. And it's just, I'm not exactly sure how we overcome that, you know, because what we do is research. But, you know, one of the ways I think that we could maybe provide more feedback to NSF, let's say. And I know that they're coming out with solicitations now, just getting back to what I was saying about the use-inspired research, that that the research community wants to work on projects like that. And so to keep them coming, keep the funding coming for that kind of effort. So, yeah.
Thank you, Marie. That's great. Heather.
Yeah, I think building off of the previous comments that ARCUS can definitely serve as a bridge, you know, that for people on this call, if you're interested in doing work, you know, use the resource within ARCUS of looking up other researchers who's done work in that area, you know, start building those connections before going straight to a community, because that's just not the right way to do things. And I think that's one thing that is available in this. There's also a lot of resources. You know, there's a lot of graduate programs that do not teach these things that we're talking about, yet those instructors can use the resources page on ARCUS, which is quite a curated collection of a lot of different things, including the QUERIC guidelines, including ICC, including my paper, that goes through, you know, doing research in a good way and can provide those extra things that students coming out and starting postdocs, being more independent, don't have all those connections. Additionally, you know, if communities are wanting more practice-based or that type of work, then, you know, researchers can move into that role of looking how to connect research to policy. I mean, we hear about evidence-based policy all the time, but I think most of us know that doesn't really exist that often. It's very tricky to get evidence to policy. Who knows what's evidence, you know, the whole knowledge hierarchy situation again. And if you're a researcher working in the Arctic, working in multiple knowledge systems, this can be an important space because you may be seen as an expert and you may be someone that's listened to, which sounds very frustrating to community members going to the many boards giving testimony that are not being listened to as often. But take that, you know, responsibility as well. I think that's very important. Those are some ideas.
Thank you, Heather. Julie?
Yeah, thanks. I would reiterate everything that previous speaker said, and also say that, you know, there are a lot of challenges. There's a lot of challenges to doing research in general. There's a lot of challenges to doing research in a good way, as Heather has said, to doing it in a co-productive way, to doing it in a collaborative way. There are lots of challenges, but we really can't use those challenges as an excuse to not try to do research in a good way, in a collaborative way with communities to make it relevant and meaningful. And so I think it is incumbent upon us as the research community at large to use the power that we have collectively and individually to be pressing for changes. And I know we also have funders on the call today, but going to funders, like Marie said, and pressuring them for certain changes that are going to help address some of these challenges, going to your universities and pressing for changes there internally that will help you do the kind of work that you need to do to work with communities, to just take all the routes possible to us, which is hard. It's a hard thing. I'm not saying it's easy, but I think we all need to be actively doing that in the spaces where we're operating. And there's a lot of different challenges, not to be divisive and to split people, but there are different challenges on the tribal side than there are on the academic research community side, and making sure that we're supporting tribes in their needs as well. For example, COERC hired a tribal research coordinator about a year ago to help us address some of these issues, and it is our long-term vision to have a tribal research coordinator or something similar for each tribe in the COERC region, so that they can be addressing these issues as specifically and individually as their communities want to. That takes a lot of money. We don't have it right now. Helping us find that money to have those people in place that will help you connect with them and do the kinds of research you want to do is a really important challenge too, I think. So thanks.
Thank you, Julie. And Howie, do you want to wrap up for us here?
Yeah, okay. I know we're ending up. I have 2 points, and largely it's reiterative. But the first are the logistical challenges. The idea that that I don't have necessarily free use of my resources to do what I necessarily need to do with and for my community collaborators. And that's not only just our funding agencies, but as Julie mentioned, it's our institutions as well. Even though I might know that my program director at NSF would be perfectly fine with me spending money in a certain way, my university might say, "Oh, that doesn't really, that doesn't fit what I know a grant is supposed to be used for." So we definitely have logistical issues at our funding agencies and at our institutional level. And the second point that I want to make is that it's the difference in what we do, but between me as a researcher and my community collaborators. Research is my job. There's not necessarily an equivalent in the community. Community collaborators tend to take research into actionable items, and I want to do that too. But there's still a bit of a disconnect, and so we have to find and we need help finding community partners that have the time, interest that to work collectively on the research itself, and then taking that research into actionable items. We do a little bit better with education because we have community collaborators with the same goals. I'm an educator. I can work with Illisagvik College and we can do a camp, or I can work with the Boys and Girls Club, or we can do the BARC Science Fair. So there's a little bit more equitability when it comes to education. With research, there's a bit of a disparity that we have to figure out a way to overcome. I'll end it there.
Thank you, Howie, and thank you all of our panelists. Unfortunately, we're going to not have time for audience questions because there was just a lot of information shared. So thank you all. And I'm going to encourage everyone to jump over to the speed networking session that will be a follow-up to this particular topic during our break. And Lisa will be over there moderating that discussion if you want to have a little bit more engagement around this topic. So thank you all again, and I'm going to move us over to our final panel for the morning before we have our break. And the topic of this panel is strengthening the National U.S. Arctic Research Network, and it will be moderated by Victoria Herman from the Arctic Institute and Sarah Morris from NOAA's Global Monitoring Laboratory. Take it away, Victoria and Sarah.
Super, thank you. Oops. Sorry, I have too many windows open. There we go. All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah Morris, and I just want to introduce you to our next panel session on strengthening the National U.S. Arctic Research Network. This panel will delve into the current landscape of the U.S. Arctic research, identifying key challenges and challenges in establishing a cohesive national research network. Panelists will explore how collaborative frameworks like the ARCUS Consortium can facilitate stronger connections between institutions, researchers, and stakeholders. The discussion will focus on practical strategies and actions in the U.S. research community and actions that the U.S. Arctic research community can adopt to strengthen its collective capacity and position itself for success in the upcoming International Polar Year. So our panel members include David Cairns from Texas A&M University, who's also the ARCUS board president, Johanna Ivanko from the University of Lapland Arctic Center, Catherine Duderstant from the University of New Hampshire, and Tony Russell from the U.S. Coast Guard Academy.
So as we move into this amazing discussion on strengthening the National U.S. Arctic Research Network, we would love for each of our panelists to give a brief who they are in 1 minute. We heard their names from Sarah, but there is so much more to these individuals than just where they are from. So we will kick off first, starting with our board president, David, and then he can pass the mic to our 4 panelists before I'll kick us off with our first question. David, over to you for a brief introduction of who you are.
Thanks, Victoria. So my name's David Cairns. I'm the board president of ARCUS. I've served in that position for the last 4 years. I'm also a longtime board member for ARCUS. My day job is that I serve as the Department of Geography department head at Texas A&M University, and I'm a landscape ecologist and biogeographer. So most of my work in the Arctic has focused on vegetation change across different Arctic landscapes, and I have experience working in Sweden and northern Alaska. And I think what I'll do is probably leave it at that and move on to the next speaker. Victoria, did you want to choose who that would be?
Why don't we go over to Catherine, who can introduce who she is?
Hi, yeah, I'm Kathy Duderstadt. I'm an atmospheric scientist at the Institute for the Study of Earth, Oceans, and Space at the University of New Hampshire. And I was also the founding lead of the New England Arctic Network, which has recently been renamed 2042 Degrees North, the New England Forum on Arctic Collaborations. I'm also currently the lead of the University of New Hampshire Arctic Network, as well as the project coordinator of our Arctic-themed NSF Graduate Research Traineeship Program, which is called Convergent Arctic Research Perspectives in Education. So I'm very thrilled to have been invited to be on this panel. I have a particular interest in how interdisciplinary regional networks can support and strengthen national and international Arctic initiatives in both research itself, as well as educating the next generation of researchers, including training our researchers and graduate students to understand the harms from past colonial research and the importance of centering Indigenous leaders and knowledge going forward. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Kathy. I will pass it to another ARCUS board member, Johanna, who we extra appreciate for joining later in her evening. Over to you, Johanna.
Thank you very much. And greetings from Finland. It's now it's about 9 o'clock or something like that in the evening, and I'm at the summer cottage in eastern Finland, right after sauna and dinner. So this is how we look after such activities. I'm the director of the Arctic Center, University of Lapland. Formerly, I was a marine biologist, or I'm trained marine biologist. I have done expeditions to the North Pole once and twice to the Antarctic on research vessels. Also the US Nathaniel Palmer once to the Antarctic, and so on and so forth. So I studied the sea ice biology when I was still doing research, but I haven't been actively doing research for the past 20 years or so. And I can then a little bit later, I can tell what we do at the Arctic Center so that you get an idea what I'm inviting you for. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And last, but certainly not least, Tony, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hey, in pan-regional Arctic fashion, I'll say good evening, good afternoon, good morning, because I think we've got all the time zones covered. Tony Russell, I'm the Executive Director for the Center for Arctic Study and Policy here at the U.S. Coast Guard Academy. We are the Coast Guard's one and only internal think tank. A relatively new operation established 10 years ago, but kind of went through a relaunch about 2 years ago, which is when I came on board as the Executive Director. I have the pleasure to work with Dr. Abby Tingstead, who is a fantastic Arctic analyst and scholar, long history in the region. And I'm also a retired Coast Guard officer of 24 years. Discovered the Arctic in, of all places, Quantico, Virginia, when I was at U.S. Marine Corps Command and Staff College way back in 2007. But now really excited to lead a education program, a research analysis program, and a partnership and outreach program based here at the Academy, primarily focused on our undergraduate cadets, of which there's 1,000, but also serving as kind of the think tank and kind of source of advice and education for our service and service leaders from our home here in New London, Connecticut. Looking forward to the conversation. Thanks.
Thank you, Tony, and thank you to all of our panelists for that introduction and for being here to talk about how we already have a strong network of U.S. Arctic researchers, but also how we can improve that through ARCUS in the year to come. And we'll kick off our panel by grounding ourselves in ARCUS's work. Not just ARCUS as a community, but as a network of member institutions, which you all represent that do incredible work. So how, from your perspective, has ARCUS as a network and ARCUS member institutions contributed to the success of Arctic research here in the United States? And looking forward, what can be done to foster even greater collaboration across the U.S. Arctic Research Network? Does anyone want to jump in first, or should I put on my professor hat and call someone out?
I'll start out. You know, I have a unique perspective on this, having been the president of ARCUS for a few years now. And one of the things that I really find exciting and just absolutely different about the Arctic community is that, or the Arctic research community, is how much of a community it really is. We have, and this is what drew me to research in the Arctic. I came from working in high mountain environments where we worked in very small groups. And the first meeting I ever went to was an all hands meeting that was done at ARCUS, and it showed me how interconnected the Arctic was, and not just in terms of the topics of study, but how interconnected the people were in the Arctic. And I think that this is one of the great strengths of doing work in the Arctic, is that not only are our systems connected, but our scholars are connected to each other, and we value that connectivity. ARCUS does a great job of facilitating that, whether it's the Witness the Arctic newsletter or it's the Arctic Info news list. All of these things help to draw the community together. But it's not without some peril. I think when the first IPY, or well, the most recent IPY, not the first one, but the most recent IPY happened, there was an explosion of Arctic research. And at the same time, while that was liberating in that it created a lot more opportunities for Arctic research, it created a much larger community, and it was more difficult to keep that community together. At the same time, some things happened with funding opportunities, and ARCUS used to have the annual meeting used to be in person, and it was always associated with the Arctic Forum. So there was a specific meeting in which a lot of people did get together, and the Arctic member institutions all got together to talk about Arctic research. That's gone away. but it's, at least the forum has gone away, but the opportunities are still there. And I would encourage all of us as members of ARCUS, or all of us who I would hope to become members of ARCUS, that we continue that spirit in the future and work together to join with each other at in-person meetings and virtual meetings, so that we can continue to build the community of Arctic researchers, but also to advance the science and other scholarship that's done within the Arctic, to make sure that we're doing things that are beneficial to the residents of the Arctic. I'm going to leave it at that and pass the baton over to one of the other speakers.
I can go ahead. The University of New Hampshire has participated in ARCUS on and off for the past several decades. And we still actually have an ARCUS workshop poster in our hallways from the last International Polar Year, 2007. However, the participation really took off again at the start of the pandemic. And you mentioned in-person meetings, but ARCUS held a virtual meeting for the first Navigating the New Arctic community meeting. That was just amazing and kind of set the bar and showed everyone what could actually be done in the virtual setting. So since then, we participated in a lot of the ARCUS virtual speed networking events and matchmaking opportunities that they've held, and really realized that ARCUS has this unique capacity to facilitate meetings and to bring people together, whether in person or virtually, as well as to communicate the shared research stories and opportunities through the newsletter and Witness the Arctic. So ARCUS does a nice job bringing people together, especially with agency-funded projects such as NSF, and probably has the potential to help sustain a lot of these collaborations and successful elements from these projects that are short-lived because of the funding. And so I imagine this could be especially important following the conclusion of the Navigating the New Arctic program. Finally, I just wanted to mention that ARCUS, because it's in Alaska, has been able to center the needs of Alaska as our only U.S. Arctic state. So can continue to advance the important work of advocating for resources to support Native Alaskan communities who are facing this formidable challenge of climate change. Thanks.
So I can share just a few comments. We're kind of a unique institute in this regard, in that our student body is only undergraduate. So we don't have graduate students, which means the research you can do is going to look a little different. We do certainly have faculty members who want to pursue research, and they have sabbatical opportunities and things like that. We only recently, just in the last couple of years, established the ability to actually pursue federal grant funding and things like that. So that's an exciting new avenue for us. Half of our mission is education, though. And the prior panel, one of the speakers mentioned the challenge of getting evidence into evidence-based policymaking. And we are graduating all Coast Guard officers who are going to end up in the public policy field in one way or another. And so during their education here at the Academy for 4 years, getting them out there into the science and research environment, be it through capstones, be it through internships, and things like that, is really valuable. It may be really their only exposure to how that evidence is actually developed and then put into use, so that maybe they can kind of break that cycle or make that transition of the evidence into policy even better. And that doesn't happen without really powerful networks. So then the two people in our center, myself and Abby, we both have in our job description kind of network maintenance. And that's not an IT network, right? That's a human network. That's being able to know that if somebody comes to us with a question on a topic related to the Arctic or the Antarctic, being humble enough to know we don't know, but we probably know somebody who does. And then know that person well enough to actually be able to kind of make an introduction and see if there's an opportunity to kind of make viable, valid connections that have meaning and purpose. So we really appreciate kind of the network focus of an entity like ARCUS. I love the emails are extremely helpful for us to kind of keep up with what's going on. I got a reminder that we got proposals to go into Rovaniemi Arctic Spirit today. So, need to be thinking about that and get that out to our faculty. So really appreciate what the network provides.
Well, perhaps I can then continue and say a few words about the Arctic Center and how we see ARCUS. And ARCUS is a very, very important platform for networking for us. Somebody in the first panel, I think, mentioned research cooperation with Russia. That is not existing anymore. And especially for the Arctic Center, it's very traumatic. We had more than 30 years history with cooperation with Russian researchers and research institutes, and in just one night, everything was wiped off the table. And so that has led us to looking for new ways of cooperation in Arctic research. And here I have to sort of stress that the Arctic Center, although it is a unit of the University of Lapland, is a research institute. We don't give teaching, so we don't have students as such, and you can't make any degrees from the Arctic Center, but from the University of Lapland, of course, you can. So we study at the Arctic Center, we study disciplines like environmental change, climate change, adaptation, resilience in the Arctic, Arctic geopolitics and security, indigenous research, of course, including Sami people, Arctic governance, Arctic anthropology, development and politics in the Arctic region, and then just green transition. Those are sort of the main disciplines, but we have many, many others as well. And we'll actually soon be looking for an expert in Arctic economy, because we don't have that at the moment. We've never had, and that is certainly a gap. But for us, this is ARCUS is really an important platform for networking, and we can offer, in addition to what we study and what we do, we can also offer the network of Arctic 6, which is a network of 6 universities in northern Scandinavia. There's University of Lapland and Oulu in Finland, Umeå and Luleå in Sweden, and Tromsø and Nord University in Norway. And the ways of cooperation can be something like visiting researchers are always welcome to come to the Arctic Center. But here is then a word of warning. It's very typical that once one comes to the Arctic Center and stays with us for a couple of months, he or she may never want to leave. We have here like Bruce Forbes and John Moore, who have stayed with us for more than 30 years. So this is really a place to be. And by the way, we are located in Rovaniemi in Lapland. But we also offer great research cooperation opportunities. We are professionals in acquiring external research funding from the Finnish Council of Research, for example, and then the EU, different European Union research instruments like Horizon, but many, many others as well. And then for those who are more interested in studying at University of Lapland or any of the Arctic 6 universities, we can actually offer international Arctic study programs held in English. And the Arctic Center, if anyone is wishing to come and visit us or cooperate with us, our working language is English. We have at the moment, I guess we have like 14 nationalities working at the Arctic Center. So everyone speaks English more or less fluent. So that's not a barrier there. Thank you.
All right, wonderful comments. Great to hear about all of the collaborations. Thank you, everyone. Moving on to our second question. How can ARCUS member institutions work with regional Arctic groups to build stronger cross-regional connections and strengthen national and international initiatives? If anyone wants to just take it away, otherwise we can call.
I can start since we're mentioned in this question. So in terms of our regional network in New England, it's been extremely valuable to be able to meet in person, especially after the pandemic. And we have a high density of academic institutions and research institutes within a few hours drive. So actually, we have a meeting coming up that I'll put in the chat, where it's just a one-day meeting and people can come and they can meet for the day and then go back, so it's not expensive, and we can share the research that we're doing and also consider how the needs of our region within the science themes, such as, the importance of understanding how changes in the Arctic and high latitudes link directly to changes in the mid latitudes of the northeastern United States and western North Atlantic Ocean. So I could see ARCUS as helping to promote these networks as well as foster a network of networks, especially as we approach the International Polar Year.
Thanks, Kathy. David, do you have any additional comments? Oh, we're on mute.
Had to be the first one. So I think Kathy was really right about the role of the regional groups. I'm in Texas, so most of my work was with the national groups because it's 90 degrees here. So I'm going to bow out on this one and leave this to others that may have a little bit more information to say about the regional groups.
Tony, do you have anything?
Yeah, I think what I'll say there, that we're not far from Kathy, and I think I met Kathy at a UNH event last December. And Kathy, you need it. We got a brand new center that I'm sitting in right now. We just opened it last week, so a convening space. So if any of you are coming to New England and on the I-95 corridor, stop on by. We'd love to see you. We're relatively new to getting into the grant proposal game here as a federal service academy, and so we're learning as we go. But Abby keeps reminding me, we actually answer our phones and we respond to emails, and so we're developing those relationships and developing kind of the proposals and ideas. And so in terms of this question about kind of those regional groups, is if you're looking for other people who might be able to provide some expertise, and we're always interested in creating opportunities for our cadets and our faculties, please don't hesitate to reach out to us, because we will always be open for a conversation. We're getting pretty good about figuring out the different ways that our program can fit into different larger research packages. And again, every time I'm doing an interaction, I'm trying to think of how do I bring the cadets into this for a learning experience for them as well. And so that's that education value of the research as it's happening, right? The process is as valuable as the outcomes, is really important to keep in mind as well.
Perhaps I can say a few words from my sort of international aspect. We do at the Arctic Center, we do research, but then we have science communications unit. But then what's really visible to anyone who visits us is the science education that we do through our Science Center exhibition. And the new one will actually be opened now for the public on the 6th of December, which is our Independence Day. So I have been here thinking whether ARCUS actually could be a platform for science education cooperation, either through science centers that you have in the States, or museums or research institutes. That would be of great interest, and certainly a new opening to us at least.
Some really great ideas for what ARCUS could do in the years to come, and particularly next year in 2025, thinking about some of the answers to the first question: what makes ARCUS special and such an important part of a strong U.S. network of Arctic researchers today, creating a network of networks, providing information out to our members, virtual and in-person convenings. How do we reach further? I know I've taken a lot of notes on what Kathy and Tony and Johanna have just said about what we could do next year tangibly. And that's particularly important because The Arctic, as we all know, is growing in importance. It has been for the past decade, and that trend continues, whether we are talking about the Arctic in a geopolitical context, as we touched on in the last panel, or its environmental importance, the real and devastating reports of global climate change coming out of the UN last week and their impacts to the Arctic as a homeland and its importance to our global systems. With this in mind, this importance for the Arctic, how can ARCUS member institutions collaborate in the year to come to better inform national security, emergency preparedness, policymaking, some of these research to applied pathways that we can work together to make more meaningful impact? I don't want to call on anyone first, but I am eyeing Tony and the Coast Guard Academy, thinking about really preparing the leaders of tomorrow in this and how we can do more through ARCUS and our member institutions.
Yeah, I had a feeling you were going to call on me first for this one, and I was kind of like, it makes sense, but I'm not ready because this is a big question. So I'll just kind of share a very like this is Tony's like personal experience in this journey in this position for 2 years. Full disclosure, I don't come with a researcher background. I come with a strong Coast Guard background. I come with a strong executive background, and honestly, a lot of my experience is in strategic communication. So I'm not joking when I say Abby's the substance, I'm the sizzle, right? It's kind of our tagline that we use. But to this question, what this means is getting the Arctic stories told so that it humanizes the region, I think is really important, especially when you think about kind of the geopolitical situation and the environmental situation, things like that. I'm often explained to people that the Arctic region is actually suffering from a little bit of overpopularity right now. And what I mean by that is there's so much attention on it that a lot of people's perceptions of the regions are actually misinformed because they're not experts. They're not spending a lot of time on it, but they're reading just enough of mainstream press and news clips to think that they understand. And the reality is a lot of those sources are not telling complete stories. And so a lot of important context is missing, and a lot of assertions about the future are overhyped or misstated or not clearly stated as guesses and not known. So we spend a lot of time trying to walk people back from their perceived beliefs so that they don't frankly make poor choices. And I know that's kind of a low bar for expectations, but it's a really important region, but it's a really sensitive region. Everything that happens in the region takes longer, costs more money, things like that. So all the choices need to be thought out really, really carefully. And so the better that you can kind of tell that story and humanize it and make sure that people take the time to understand what they're talking about, I think the better the outcomes are going to be. And so to kind of wrap up what I mean there is while you're doing your research, you have to be thinking about the dissemination of that and the dissemination beyond just other researchers. How do you make the stories approachable, plain language, meaning that sometimes you're it's short. You're always going to have to make choices about leaving out some of the details. But if you're not talking at all, nobody knows anything about it and isn't given reason to pause and think more deeply about it. So those are a couple of my thoughts on that one.
Perhaps I can continue, and my comment also includes an invitation. We just recruited a full research professor to study Arctic geopolitics and security, and we also submitted to the Finnish Research Council an application to become a center of excellence in holistic Arctic security. So this is a response. This is our reflection to the changed geopolitical, everything set up, at least here near Finland, and in the Arctic in general, and of course yeah, talking about security, we are also holding our breath. What is the outcome of your elections in November? But anyway, if anyone is interested in studying Arctic security, we would be more than happy to discuss these possibilities in our Arctic Spirit conference that we organize in May 2025. It'll take place in Rovaniemi between 5 and 7 May, 5th to 7th May in 25. And the title of the Arctic Spirit conference is Elements of Security. So please contact me if you wish to get some more information.
So with the New England Arctic Network, we've heard over and over the need to have a network of scientific experts ready and willing to assist in a crisis. And so ARCUS could play a role in this as well, as kind of building this ready-to-act network, maybe working alongside IARPC collaborations and the other networks that are in place to have scientists who are willing to be able to kind of drop everything in a crisis and respond and give the expertise to agencies that they need.
Another thing that I'd like to sort of at least mention is that some of these mechanisms have been in place in the past, and unfortunately they have gone away for reasons that were never quite clear. Some of them were bureaucratic, some of them were political in the U.S. But things like the North Slope Science Initiative was aimed specifically at being useful for resource use and questions associated with domestic security and things like that, but it doesn't exist anymore, or exists only on paper. There's a lot of reasons for why that happened, but I think that we as members of ARCUS could make sure that we're talking to our legislators and letting them know that these things do have value, and to really look at ways to put together things that are either operating at the federal government level and then or other levels. And it'd be very interesting to see if ARCUS could contribute to those things as well.
Agreed. All wonderful points. I think we only have a couple more minutes, so we'll try to cruise through our final question here. Victoria, I think that's our plan. So for the final question, as we approach the International Polar Year 2032, how can ARCUS members begin to collaborate now to ensure that U.S. Arctic research is well coordinated and positioned to make a meaningful contribution to the global effort?
I can start. Just a couple things that wanting to make sure to bring up is this idea of distinguishing ARCUS from IARPC collaborations. And, there's a lot of overlap, so trying to understand where everyone can best fit, as well as reminding people of what activities were done by ARCUS in the last International Polar Year. I think those would be great, and continuing the events that are being held already by ARCUS.
I'll fill the silence, ironically, with saying, be ready to tell the stories, and put communication at the forefront of your plan. I often had to remind, when I was active duty in the Coast Guard and communication was my specialty, I had to remind everybody, it's like, not everybody is actually a good communicator. And that means it's a specialty of its own. So putting some thought into who are your communicators within the ARCUS community, who can help kind of run that effort and make sure that the story is told.
Perhaps I can finish here by saying that keep us, the Arctic Center and our Scandinavian partners in the loop, because we can certainly, together we can make very good projects.
Well, with that, I think we are finishing exactly on time. So if everyone could please join me in giving a huge virtual round of applause to Kathy, Johanna, David, and Tony for being awe-inspiring panelists and leaders in the ARCUS community, showing what we have done as a global community for U.S. Arctic research, but even more importantly, what we can do in the years to come. And I hope everyone on this Zoom sees themselves in something that they heard on this panel, because there will be lots of opportunities over the next 12 months for you to make these suggestions a reality and our U.S. Arctic research community stronger than ever. So thank you to all of our panelists for a great session. And I will hand it back over to Audrey to bring us into the break and introduce some networking rooms for those who are interested. Or if Audrey or Britt.
Yeah, I'll
is
jump back in here. I think right now we're going to be going into a break or an optional speed networking round. So if anyone would like to continue some of the conversations that we were starting in these three panels, there are three breakout rooms that will be hosted. The breakout room number 1 has opportunities for ARCUS member collaborations. That's a great place to go for that. Breakout number 2, community needs, and then continuing this conversation about how to strengthen the U.S. Arctic Research Network is in breakout 3. But we have additional rooms open based on some of the ideas that you guys shared in your registrations about topics that you'd like to connect with others around. So we have a room that's just open discussion, but then breakouts 5 through 8 are themed. So ice, oceans, and coastal connections is breakout 5. Breakout 6, energy, infrastructure, and sustainable development. Breakout 7, international collaboration. And breakout 8 to focus on education exchanges and student field experiences. So please feel free to add yourself to a breakout room if you'd like to go connect with others around any of these topics. If not, please feel free to hang out here with us in the plenary or go take a break, and we'll be reconvening to talk more about ways to get involved with ARCUS in the coming year at 11:10 a.m. Alaska time. So please enjoy your discussions, and we'll be back here in the plenary in just a few minutes. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. Hope you had a good break or a good conversation in the breakout rooms. We're going to go ahead and get started with the next part of our annual meeting. And Dave, are you here? Next little bit of the meeting, we're going to talk about ARCUS board leadership. And I think you and Victoria are on the hook for this one.
Okay. So, let's see here. Just let me get things set up. So, ARCUS is the board leadership of ARCUS is all volunteer, and we have a series of 12 or 13 board members for the board. And you'll see from the slide that's up on your screens where each of us are. So there's a series of people that are elected to the officer positions. I'm the president right now. Victoria will be stepping into that role at the end of this year. Peter Webley is the treasurer. Corey is Peter Webley is the secretary, and Corey Erickson is the treasurer. And then we have two members at large on our executive committee, Julie Raymond Jacobian and Cheryl Rosa. Our other board members are Helena Berman, Kana Ichikayak, Alexis Will, Stacy Fritz, Heather Sayak Gordon, Johanna Ikabalko, and Chelsea Koch. So is there anything, Victoria, that you wanted to say other than that about the composition of the board?
That's perfect, Dave.
And I think the most important thing to talk about with regard to the board is that we do have an upcoming board election. Two of our members, Kana and Julie, are going to be stepping down after having served the board for a little while. There's going to be an open call for nominations. And so if you are interested in becoming more engaged in ARCUS and feel like you have a little bit of time to give to the organization, we would love to see as many people nominated for board elections as possible. Self-nominations are welcome, so don't feel like you have to go talk to somebody else to nominate you. If you want to serve on the ARCUS board, feel free to submit your own name. There is a committee that is a board nominations committee that will review the nominations and present a slate of candidates for the ARCUS board and voting representatives of ARCUS institutional members. So the board is elected by ARCUS institutional members. And the election is going to run for about 2 weeks, starting in mid-November, and we'll release the results of that election sometime in December. And those new board members will start their new term. It's a 3-year term, and they will start that in January of 2025. So if you have any interest in doing this, we really do encourage you to talk to any of us on the current board about our experiences. Reach out to your institutional representatives to learn more about the consortium's challenges and opportunities. And we look forward to seeing new leadership emerge from this process to continue the work that we're doing. And as I said earlier, we're going to be led by a new board president. So beginning in 2025, Victoria Herman from the Arctic Institute is going to be the board president. And we'd like to invite her back to say a few words. So Victoria, you can take a minute to introduce yourself again and share some of your vision and goals for ARCUS in the coming year.
Thank you, Dave. And I want to take this opportunity for everyone to thank Dave for an incredible board chairmanship. Dave has led ARCUS for years with not just his own insight and experience, but his whole heart. ARCUS would not be where it is without you, Dave. So a huge thank you for all of your leadership and your personal inspiration for why I chose to step up in the next year. It's because of how great of a leader you were. So thank you, Dave, for all that you have done for ARCUS.
Thanks, Victoria.
As Dave mentioned, I will be stepping into his big shoes of ARCUS leadership in January, and I am inspired by what I have heard today of all that ARCUS has done over the past 30 plus years of being a leader in convening and facilitating collaboration and friendships in the Arctic research community, and what ARCUS can do in the years to come. We have a lot of big events in Arctic research in the next decade with the International Polar Year, the next U.S. chairmanship of the Arctic Council, the Decade for Cryosphere Research that the UN announced last year. And all of that requires a strong network of communities of researchers, scholars, practitioners, knowledge holders coming together to do more than any one institution or individual can do themselves. And that's the beauty of ARCUS, being that facilitator, that connector, and in 2025, an incubator for new research teams, for new ideas, and for new opportunities for everyone on this Zoom to have an active role in creating a stronger and more collaborative future for Arctic research. And we are so excited to have these opportunities for all of you to get involved. I'm looking at all 56 of you and hope to see you actively engaged in some of our newly formed member committees that will be purposeful places for us to think about how we expand our impact, how we more clearly communicate who we are and what we do, how to center our pillars of equity, of inclusion, of cross-border collaboration in how we put ourselves forward, and how we are best serving our members. And my ARCUS board member, colleague and friend Chelsea is going to come on in just a moment to share some of these new committee opportunities with you. But I just again want to thank Dave for his leadership. I am excited to see all of you in these committees in the year to come. And I hope that as I step into this chair role, that all of you will flood my inbox with ideas for what we can accomplish together. So thank you, and I look forward to spamming all of your inboxes with exciting opportunities come January. And with that, I am going to hand it over to our incredible board member, Chelsea, to talk about our ARCUS committees that are planned for next year.
Great, thanks, Victoria. And hi, everyone. My name is Chelsea Koch. I joined the board earlier this year. And so far, I've been really inspired by all of you. And so now I will walk you through some of these member committees that we've talked about or that Victoria introduced. So I'll guide you through the process for proposing and participating in ARCUS member-led committees. We'll cover how you can get involved, what the nomination process looks like, and share a preview of the committees we currently have planned for the coming year. So Community discussions like those happening during today's ARCUS meeting play an essential role in shaping new committees. Both ARCUS staff and the board look to your insights and interests to identify topics that warrant a dedicated committee. So if you're passionate about advancing a specific collaborative topic and are interested in leading a group, we would love to hear from you. The process is very flexible. There isn't a formal deadline or set call for committee proposals. Instead, you can reach out to any ARCUS staff or board member at any time with your ideas. And we're here to help connect you with others who share your interests and provide the support needed to move your ideas forward throughout the year. So now, for those of you who would like to join an existing committee, we'll be opening nominations for committee membership as well as self-nominations in January and February. Updates and reminders will be shared on the ARCUS website, the Arctic Info listserv, and our monthly newsletter. So please keep an eye out for those announcements. Committee chairs will review all nominations with decisions made based on the specific composition and needs of each group. If you're already interested in joining one or more committees, please share your interest through the participant survey that we'll be sharing at the end of today's meeting. Additionally, if you're considering a leadership role as a chair or co-chair, I'd encourage you to contact ARCUS's Interim Director, Audrey Taylor. She can provide insights into the roles, expectations, and the level of commitment involved. So for a preview of what's ahead in 2025, we're currently planning to establish 4 standing committees open to all ARCUS individual members and institutional member affiliates. So a quick overview of each of those committees and what they'll be focusing on. So first we have our annual meeting committee. And this committee will lead the planning, organization, and execution of the 2025 ARCUS Annual Meeting. They'll be involved in setting the agenda, coordinating activities, and securing speakers, all while ensuring alignment with ARCUS's strategic goals. The committee will work closely with ARCUS staff on participant registration and will collaborate with the Communications and Outreach Committee to drive strong attendance and engagement. After the meeting, they'll help produce a comprehensive report on meeting outcomes. Then we have the Communications and Outreach Committee. And so this is one that's supporting ARCUS staff, and they will help identify and share Arctic research and education updates through webinars, newsletters, blogs, social media, and any other similar venues. They'll work to spotlight ARCUS member activities and may assist in moderating online community discussions. This group will also play a role in coordinating responses to calls for Arctic research community input and collaborate with other committees to communicate their efforts and achievements. Then we have the Connections and Community Building Committee, representing ARCUS at both national and international forums. This committee will focus on strengthening relationships and expanding the ARCUS membership base. They'll develop resources like the ARCUS Member Ambassador Toolkit to support advocacy and outreach efforts. Working with the Proposals and Fundraising Committee, they'll share information to help shape community-generated ideas into actionable proposals. The committee will also ensure follow-up on key topics from the 2024 annual meeting and oversee ARCUS institutional membership renewals. Then we have the Proposals and Fundraising Committee, and this committee's goal is to position ARCUS as a central hub for Arctic research collaboration. They'll assist members and stakeholders in forming working groups to respond to specific RFPs and funding opportunities, creating proposals that leverage ARCUS's collective expertise. In partnership with the Communications and Outreach Committee, they'll promote collaboration, knowledge sharing, and responses to funding opportunities that align with ARCUS's mission. And so that is the basic overview of these committees, and we are open to any questions that you all may have about the process to join or what these committees will be covering. And if there are no questions, I will turn things back over to Audrey to talk a bit more about ARCUS membership. I'm not seeing any questions in the chat, so Audrey, back to you.
Thank you so much, Chelsea. And I do want to reiterate that if you have any questions about committee membership or the process or anything, please don't hesitate to reach out to me or any of the other staff. We're happy to talk you through the process and give you some more information if you'd like. So then I want to also broaden the discussion and invite those of you who may not already be a member of ARCUS to consider joining us as either an institutional or an individual member. So as we've heard throughout today's discussion and in the panel discussions in particular, building connections and building our network is a vital part of advancing Arctic research, education, and policy. And some of these challenges that were brought up during the panel discussions just are really ripe for this kind of network approaches. I think Kathy said that in the third panel discussion. And I think that ARCUS is well positioned to help address some of these challenges in that network capacity. So joining us as a member is a meaningful way to be part of that network and help contribute to these collective efforts. And so I just wanted to speak a little bit more about that membership process. And you might be wondering who's eligible to become a member and how you do that. And I want to ensure everyone that membership in our organization is truly inclusive. And we're pretty unique in that regard, in that a lot of Arctic research focused institutional organizations tend to be focused on a particular theme or topic or demographic, geographic location. And ARCUS is really unique in that we welcome everyone to join us, regardless of where you sit in your career or your interests or what you how you interact with the Arctic. So we have a couple different levels of membership. We have institutional members, which include universities, research institutes, academic departments, nonprofits, tribal organizations that are conducting essential Arctic research across a broad spectrum of fields. We have government agencies, also a part of that play a key role in Arctic policy, ensuring that our research aligns with community needs. And then we've got nonprofits and NGOs that are focusing on advocacy and conservation. So we have all of those folks that are eligible to become institutional members of ARCUS, and industry as well. I forgot to mention, we've got private industry organizations that are members because they have their own interests that they'd like to see represented in this network. So if you are representing an institution that you feel could benefit from membership in ARCUS, I encourage you to reach out, explore with one of the staff our dues structure, and see, what the timeline and how the whole process works. We would love to welcome you as an institutional member. And then for individuals, we offer opportunities to become an individual member. It is a free process. We hope you'll connect with us, learn, contribute to Arctic research. This can include researchers, educators, policy experts, who are enhancing our understanding of complex Arctic issues, students, early career professionals, community members, citizen scientists. If you are engaging in work in the Arctic or you're interested in help telling those stories, as Tony said, we would love to engage with you in an individual membership role. So please feel free to ask about membership. It's open to everyone, regardless of geographic affiliation, regardless of career stage, of what your specific background or field is. So if you're interested in collaborating and being part of our network, please feel welcomed, feel like you are requested at the highest level to reach out and help broaden our network and make ARCUS Arctic research community and network for everyone. I also wanted to say that if one of those committees that Chelsea mentioned is interesting to you and you're not currently a member, you can become a member and jump into committee membership as well. So if that interests you as a particular hook, then please reach out about what that process looks like. And I guess as far as institutional members in particular, I wanted to say a little bit more about why you might want to engage at that level, since there is a dues structure, whereas the individual memberships are free. Joining ARCUS as a institutional member allows us to advance our collective efforts by providing some flexible funding for us to address new and upcoming and kind of immediate critical issues. So it's really important to have that flexibility. And you also, as an institution, joining us as an institutional member, you step into a leadership role within that Arctic research community. So institutional members have voting capacity. Each institutional member has 2 member representatives that are invited to vote in our elections. We often target specific activities for our institutional members, and this can really help amplify your impact as an institution to help engage in this collaborative community working to address pressing Arctic challenges. We can also help increase the visibility of your institution's work through our channels and events. Also, being an institutional member allows you to access unique resources and events happening in the Arctic. We will invite our member reps and anyone else from those institutions to participate in community meetings and workshops and discussions that are shaping Arctic research and community engagement. It also allows members to access research and educational networking resources that help support Arctic-focused projects. And then lastly, what we are all working towards, I think, is helping shape the future of Arctic research. And so we invite you to become an institutional member, in part to join other thought leaders in setting priorities and advocating for Arctic research needs, and to influence Arctic research collaboration going into the International Polar Year and going into this period of time where I think the Arctic is being seen as an additional security concern, and we're just seeing so much more interest in this as a region. So we'd love to invite you to connect with our network and with other institutions in our network that have similar goals and community goals. So we're working together to build and sustain a community, and we are inviting all of you. If you're not already a member, we are inviting you to please join us. We would love to see you be a part of our network to help have a meaningful and lasting impact. I think that's what I need to say about that. We can move to the next slide. We also wanted to just give a shout out to all of our current organizational members that are that have joined us for a while and are already institutional members. Thank you so much. We appreciate your participation in our community. We encourage you to reach out to discuss how we can enhance the value of your membership, and I have a bit more on that in just a second. We also wanted to make sure everybody knew our ARCUS dues will remain the same in the coming year. We do have a number of institutional members that will be up for renewal in 2025. So please keep an eye out for dues notices that will be rolling out in the next couple months here. And I wanted to take this moment to give a special shout out to the University of Alaska Fairbanks that has really kicked off this renewal period for institutional memberships with a generous 3-year membership. And I wanted to just bump it over to Helena Berman, who is one of our institutional member reps from UAF, just to say a couple words about why UAF felt it was critical to renew their institutional membership. Helena, are you on?
Yeah, thanks, Audrey. Yeah, hi everyone. UAF loves ARCUS dearly, and our membership dues are one way that we can show that. The importance of having a networking organization like this, I think, can't be understated, and so we're really keen to support it for the Arctic national, but also international connections that ARCUS makes. I will shout out ARCUS's role as a facilitator. I feel like hasn't really been mentioned a lot today. There's a lot of talk about, the panels were fascinating. Everyone gets the newsletters. Those are extremely useful. What we really lean on ARCUS for is the deep bench ARCUS has for facilitating collaborations. We have a workshop coming up, our Bridging Arctic Gateways workshop, where the University of Alaska Fairbanks and UMaine are getting together and exploring different avenues for research collaboration. And ARCUS is at the heart of that. ARCUS staff are helping put that on, organizing the travel, facilitating sessions, and that's what we as an institution really value as well out of ARCUS. So I wanted to give a shout out to that, the deep bench that ARCUS has for more than just a newsletter. It's also wonderful. Anyway, back to you, Audrey. Hope that covered it.
Thank you so much, Helena. And again, thank you to UAF for kicking off our 2025 membership renewals. I also wanted to warmly welcome a couple of new institutional members. Syracuse University's Department of Earth and Environmental Sciences has just applied for and we're processing their ARCUS membership. And we just wanted to give a shout out to Jessica Mejia and Melissa Chipman from Syracuse, who I believe at least Jessica is on this call. Hello, thank you, welcome. And is there anything you'd like to say on behalf of Syracuse?
Hi, everyone. Thanks. We are really excited to join ARCUS. We have some snow, ice, permafrost research, and a lot of people conducting field work in the Arctic from Alaska to Greenland. So we're excited to join everyone.
Thanks so much, Jessica. Welcome again. And thanks for joining. And then we also had a recent sort of re-upping of membership from the Cold Climate Housing Research Center, which was a member previously, and now they've just joined again. And we'd like to welcome you, say thank you. And then I'll just invite anyone from CCHRC who's on this call to wave or say hi for a second. Thank you, Stacy. Anyone else?
The two CCHRC fellows, Leah and Molly, were on the call. So this is a great introduction for these fellows who are new to Alaska to learn about the Arctic research community. And CCHRC, with whom I'm affiliated, is really happy to rejoin. Thanks.
Thank you, Stacy. Welcome to new institutions. Re-welcome to UAF. And of course, as I mentioned, we'll be reaching out to our other institutional members who are up for renewal, and we would love to see you renew and continue to be part of our network. Next slide. And Helena gave us a lovely introduction to just a quick bit of information I wanted to provide to our current institutional members, individual members, and anyone considering membership. Something we are increasingly inspired to focus on is, in addition to connecting our network and providing a mechanism for streamlined communications out to our network and input on activities that folks are interested in seeing and ways we could broaden our community. One thing we'd like to invite people to consider going forward is that ARCUS has a tremendous capacity to work with our institutional and individual members on enhancing Arctic research proposals. So we offer a suite of services to help ensure collaborative Arctic research projects reach their fullest potential. We have a huge amount of expertise in our staff, and some of the services that we offer are on the slide that you're seeing now, and we invite you to connect with us at any point to discuss ways that ARCUS and our member affiliates can add capacity to your collaborative projects. And this could include any number of activities that we've discussed as things that ARCUS has done in the past. If you want to talk about ways that we can broaden impacts to the greater research community or to Arctic communities themselves, to the public, to teachers, to students. If you want to talk about new and novel ways to do research dissemination or outreach, to do project management, interesting topics for conferences, workshops, we can do that. And we would love to connect with you about things that you're interested in. So please don't hesitate to reach out. I think that we would love to see new and different ways to help our organizations, our institutional members and our individual members achieve your research goals and achieve your networking goals. So please reach out at any point to any of the staff. And I will also say that I think that all of the staff and probably the board have been taking notes during our panel discussions this morning, and we've got a plethora of ideas that we can generate ourselves, that we may be reaching out to you specifically or to our community in general with some ideas for how ARCUS could help address some of those challenges we've identified going forward, like working with communities, strengthening our U.S. Arctic Research Network, broadening the field of Arctic security, and then of course a strong U.S. presence in IPY planning and activities. So lots of ways that we can work together and increase the support for and raise the flag for Arctic research going into this next decade and more. So please join us. Please consider us as an organization that can help you get things done. Next slide. I wanted to just flag a couple activities as a way to sort of get people thinking about what those types of project activities could include. Some things we've done in the past to facilitate cross-institutional research collaboration. The Sea Ice Prediction Network is an activity that still has some activities ongoing. It's largely wrapped up at this point, but we were the project management office for that network for a long time. Probably some of you were engaged in that project. Similarly, the study of Arctic environmental change, also a large cross-institutional research collaboration that ARCUS facilitated and was the project office for. So we can bring together institutions into these large collaborative projects that are a lot for one institution to manage individually. And we have done that numerous times in the past. And if that's something that you're thinking about, but you don't know exactly how to make work, feel free to get in touch. We can also fairly quickly and flexibly arrange to do conferences. We did one in 2023, Beringia Days for the National Park Service, that brought together experts in Beringian science and just explored opportunities for new and different science, as well as opportunities for collaboration. So we encourage you to reach out if you've got a conference need that you could explore or would like to explore with us. And then we can also do these kind of flexible collaboration workshops. And Helena alluded to the Bridging Arctic Gateways collaboration. And that's something that we are increasingly exploring, especially with this new virtual capacity that we have as an Arctic research community after the pandemic. It's fairly straightforward to bring disparate communities together and start talking about how to work together in a multidisciplinary fashion and kind of think broadly about where that collaboration could go, whether it's an individual funding opportunity or a specific goal that the institutions are setting. So consider ARCUS for these types of project incubation needs that you might have. We would love to work with you on sort of any ideas that you have to help bring the community together. And I think that is, at this point, all I wanted to say, and I'll just wrap up by saying thank you so much for being here today. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for being part of our network. Thank you to our members, both institutional and individual, for supporting ARCUS and allowing us to support you. We will have an optional 15-minute networking session, so please stick around if you have a few minutes to spare and you want to continue to connect with some of the other folks on this call. And we hope to see you at future ARCUS events, and we hope you connect with us. We hope you consider nominating yourselves for our board or our committees, or just ping us if you've got some unique needs that you'd like to see if we can support. I'll also throw out, if you have additional thoughts or suggestions for ARCUS or for Arctic research in general in this coming year or in the coming years, please share your feedback. We've got a survey available via this QR code displayed on the screen and linked in the Zoom chat. We'll also send the survey link out to anyone who registered for today's meeting. So hopefully we'll get some good feedback. So once again, thank you for joining us. I'll say that on the behalf of the board and the staff.
We're at the end of our meeting, and we were going to invite you, if you were interested in taking part in one of those speed networking rounds. We have the breakout rooms open once again, and you're welcome to find colleagues in one of those breakout rooms as a final way to connect today. Otherwise, that is our meeting. We appreciate you all very much for taking the time to be here.